Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about what happened in the market today. An absolutely wild day again in the market. Very wild swings across the board, not so much on Tesla. Tesla was honestly kind of tame in my opinion for the most part, pretty much making another inside day, but things like NVIDIA, for instance, extremely wild moves, very aggressive up and down, and even SPY and QQQ, some pretty decent moves up and down as well. And there's a lot of mixed signals here. So I'll go over what I personally think, what I foresee happening, etc. But yeah, let's jump into it. Let's start off with Tesla, of course. I'm going to go over SPY and QQQ very briefly as well. And, you know, there's mixed signals. Honestly, if the bears were going to destroy this market, they had many chances. They had, like, today was a phenomenal chance. They kind of dropped the ball, to be completely honest with you. But there are still some signs of concern. Now, Tesla... So, you know, the volume you can see is substantially decreasing, right? But usually when you see this kind of parabolic move up and then you see, where's the drawing tool? And then you see this kind of volume decrease like this aggressively as well. That means that we are getting ready for a very large move. Like this volume is going to pick up very soon. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow or the day after. Could be tomorrow. I don't know when. Nobody knows when, but it's going to happen probably sooner than later. Could easily be tomorrow. And the volume should spike once again. And that's where we should finally get that that move out of this little tight range that we've been forming for the past like really 4 days at this point, right? Including today. And again, if I had to pick a direction, I do think the bulls still have the slight upper hand. I still see a lot of, you know, December calls coming in, $1 million calls coming in on Tesla throughout the day and really throughout the week, to be completely honest with you, especially at the beginning of the week. But I'm seeing some of them again today. So I do think the bulls still have the upper hand, right? I think the bulls do have the upper hand. And on top of that, before I go back to the daily, I want to show you guys one more thing really quickly. If I go back to the 1 hour chart, the 1 hour chart is actually printing, you know, a pretty bullish looking pattern. Now it is, you know, I'm not going to lie. It's, you know, Tesla needs to start pushing back up here because there's two things that, despite this being a bullish pattern, which of course is going to be, you know, an ascending triangle, one of my personal favorite patterns, this is a very good pattern overall. Tesla needs to start pushing. Like, you know, it can't. It's called an ascending triangle for a reason, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, the only way for this ascending triangle to play out is, well, for Tesla to continue ascending. If we stop ascending and we start losing essentially this little red trend line, this thesis essentially really starts to fall apart. And in my opinion, if we lose this trend line, and if we stop on the 1 hour making these higher lows that we've been so far making, so far successfully, that's when I think that this will most likely give a pretty damn good hint as to how this sort of, you know, several inside day candles are going to play out. And again, I think if we lose it to the downside and we lose that trend line on the 1 hour, I think this is going to play out in the bearish fashion. However, on the flip side, if we do not lose this trend line and in fact we actually break out of this sideways kind of resistance point that has rejected us, including today, several times now, then it plays out to the bull side. So in my opinion, honestly, the easiest way to play Tesla right here, right now, without putting too much, you know, crazy thought into it, without overcomplicating with a million different indicators, etc., probably looking for this pattern, right? Watch for this pattern to play out. I think this should be an early tell as to where Tesla will most likely head next. And again, I do say the bulls have the upper hand because like I said, the calls are still coming in. This is technically a bullish pattern. It doesn't have to play out in a bullish fashion, but you know, in my opinion, the chances are more likely that it does, but nothing is guaranteed. And the 1 hour market bias is still giving us some nice support. So the bulls have all the tools here they need to succeed. The bulls have all the opportunities to essentially go higher and to make this pattern break out, well, higher, right? And for Tesla to break out of this little congestion period, break out of this, you know, at this point, pretty much 3 inside day candles in a row, and at the very least, make its way back up to somewhere around that 265 level. Best case scenario, in my opinion, will be closer to about the 385 to 400 level, right? I don't think we'll go too much higher than that personally, but that's kind of what this will potentially play out if it, of course, plays out. So again, in my opinion, 1 hour, watch for this. And really just, you know, let's see where it goes, right? Let's see where it goes. Nobody knows where it's going to go. So we wait and we let the candles and the chart essentially tell us. Now, another way to look at it also is if we ever lose about 335 and especially close an hour candle below 335, I also think the bulls are really throwing away what, you know, is a bullish setup, right? So, you know, again, watch for those kind of situations to unfold. Again, nobody knows for sure. Let those play out. Now, going back to the daily chart really quickly, another way you can also play it to kind of determine if Tesla still has that steam left to make that way higher, is essentially turning on the 8 EMA and the 21 EMA, right? The 8 EMA, very good. 8 EMA is a phenomenal short-term, very aggressive moving indicator, but it's very powerful in the sense that whenever you get parabolic moves like this, whenever a stock really starts to run, or if it's just on a very powerful uptrend, usually these two EMAs, 8 and the 21 EMA, which is the white and the yellow line, are very, very good supports. Now, the market bias I have is much slower but more powerful. But when you're on a very powerful trajectory, whether it's a aggressive short-term run-up or you're just on a nice little run-up overall, which I'll show you two examples of what those look like, watch for these two indicators. For instance, let's take a quick example of what it can look like. So Walmart, as an example, very boring, very slow stock, but you can see it's been hugging both of these lines, the 21 EMA and the 8 EMA. The whole write up, if it ever drops to 8 EMA, it goes to the 21, that usually holds and it moves higher. It hasn't even come to the market bias. And so far, so good. So far, so good. Spotify, another great example, right? This is where the 8 EMA is useful, where you can see it's just on such aggressive move up that it's not even dropping below that 8 EMA, right? The 21 is below it, but it's not even losing the 21 or the 8 EMA. Tesla's in a similar situation here where, honestly, as long as the 8 EMA holds, I still think it's pretty damn good. But again, if Tesla starts losing this 1 hour ascending triangle pattern, that's not good, right? That's already eyebrow raising. If we lose 335 again, and especially close an hour candle below 335, okay, that's like, hey, what's going on over here, right? That's not good. Like, why is this happening? So that's step number one. And step number two is essentially really just closing a daily candle back below the 8 EMA, which again is going to move up tomorrow. Tomorrow, it'll probably be closer to the very low 330s. So watch for that as well. Those are probably the two important levels for the bulls to hold and the bears to break, because if we lose and fall below those levels, I think this short-term move up is officially done, and we most likely make our way back down. Ultimately, at the very least, the 21 EMA is sitting at pretty much $300 per share, or ultimately, like I said many times, where I'm personally going to get very interested in buying if it actually happens. And again, you have to remember, Tesla's very volatile right now, despite it's consolidating the past few days. I do believe that once this consolidation ends, the direction that it does finally end up picking will most likely be quick, fast and quick, whether it's up or down. So just be very, very aware of that. This will be very, very quick. If it's to the downside, right, we already talked about upside targets. At the very least, I think it'll be 365, but I can see going up to closer to 385 to about closer to 400 is like the best case scenario. But to the downside, if we do pick to that direction, if we start losing again that 335-ish level, that ascending triangle pattern, and of course that 8 EMA, I honestly think we'll blast below the 21 EMA. Maybe we'll take a pit stop at it, but I think ultimately we will most likely make our way back down to about that 618 Fibonacci level, which is sitting around 285. Worst case, I can see it to these double green lines sitting around here, which will be closer to about the 270s-ish region, which will come right into that market bias support. And that's where I personally will start getting much more interested again. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just the way I'm looking at it, right? That's just the way I'm eyeballing it right now. But again, it really comes down to, in my opinion, the ADMA and of course this 1 hour pattern. Watch for these two things. Probably the most important things. These are very short-term moving averages and short-term patterns. But Tesla, when it's this parabolic, that's when these short-term moving averages really come in clutch to determine the short-term momentum. And if it's still there, essentially, which so far it is. So far it is. I'm not saying it's bearish. I'm not saying it's going to fall. I do think the bulls actually have the upper hand. As of right now, I have no reason to believe the bulls will throw in the towel. But again, losing this pattern and losing that 8 daily EMA is what makes me believe that the bulls have lost their lead, essentially, and we most likely begin a correction. But yeah, that's kind of what I see for Tesla moving forward. So all that being said and done, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think down below. In terms of options flow, actually, so we already talked about the bulls are dominating the bears still. Absolutely no question about it. Yeah, and 27 million confirmed bullish flow on Tesla. So I'm not going to lie, with all the bullish flow I am seeing in the millions in calls I'm seeing for December, I think it was like December 12th or something like that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 13th, right? A lot of December 13th calls coming in. If Tesla doesn't play out this pattern and it doesn't make its way at least to 365, that would be very, very, very disappointing. Like, I'll be completely honest, that would be very disappointing. Also, the BX trender actually had a false signal yesterday and it went back to red. A little bit of an eyebrow raise as well. So a lot of mixed signals, but I think the easiest way to put it without anything too confusing, ADMA, rising triangle. Watch for that. That should tell the whole story, and that should determine what the hell happens next. And I want to very quickly go over the market. So the market is a very interesting spot. I don't like the way QQQ looks okay. I'm not gonna lie, QQQ looks just okay. SPY actually looks better. I think SPY doesn't look too bad. But my main concern is this. For SPY and QQQ really, but especially for QQQ. SPY, at the very least, was able to come up and fill this gap, and it actually closed even above the gap. So SPY, honestly, showing some strength there, showing some decent strength there. Now, the MACD is, of course, flip bearish. That I don't like to see at all. But, you know, the reason it's showing some strength is because it not only filled the gap, but it closed above this gap fill, and it essentially now pretty much eliminated this island bearish reversal pattern. I like to see that. That's a bullish sign. That, or at the very least, maybe it's not necessarily fully bullish, but it definitely reduces and tones down the bearishness that maybe, you know, some people had on SPY, right? I think it does. However, QQQ, unfortunately, the same cannot be said. Now we have a nice looking hammer candle right off the trend line, right off the market bias. All good news, but MACD is still flip bearish. And the thing that I don't like is the fact that QQQ, unlike SPY, couldn't even come up to fill this gap at this bearish island reversal pattern. Like, it's still unfilled. This needs to fill for QQQ. Like, this thing has to fill, or else tech is going to be continuing to be weaker and weaker and weaker, right? And, you know, there's a chance that SPY starts to slowly outperform QQQ overall, even though it technically already has been. That may continue because, again, I do not like the weakness that QQQ is showing relative to SPY. SPY looks stronger than QQQ, which tells me that tech, and potentially even the Mag 7, which is pretty much all tech, right? Tesla, NVIDIA, I mean, kind of AMD, I guess, Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, like that tells me that there's a chance that these things, these mega cap stocks are gonna not really perform as well moving forward until I can start seeing QQQ have some better life in it, right? That's what you want to be seeing. You want to, at the very least, have QQQ fill this gap to eliminate this pattern. And again, just because we filled the gap, it doesn't mean that the bearish scenario is out, but it reduces the chances of it being more prominent because of just filling the gap alone. But again, usually when you have gap downs like this and you can't even come up to fill the gap, that's a sign of concern, right? Same idea as to when we had this massive gap up and we didn't even come down to fill this gap below us, right? So we're kind of stuck in between two scenarios. We're stuck in between a very bullish scenario and a very bearish scenario because we have an island bullish gap up and we have an island bearish gap down on the QQQ, and we're not filling either of them. We got close to the bullish, or the one down here, to fill it. Over here, didn't fill it. Got close here, didn't fill it. QQQ is in a very kind of limbo land here. It's like it doesn't know where it wants to go. Like, where's the next overall place to go? The bears had a damn good chance today and yesterday to really topple this thing down. It didn't. It actually held on the market bias and the trend line, which is good for the bulls, But there needs to be more follow through from the bulls here on tech and QQQ in order to really, punish the bears essentially. Because right now, the bears still have a chance, unfortunately, which I hate to say that, but they do, until I see at the very least this gap filled, but ideally closed above it, kind of like SPY did. But, there's a chance QQQ can even potentially weigh down on SPY. So, yeah, let's see. Very confusing signals here, and I don't like that the MACD is bearish right now. I don't like that it's flipped to the bearish side. And one thing I also don't like is the fact that the VIX is actually ever so slightly flipping bullish, right? Again, I don't want to be a bear. I don't want to say bearish things, but I'm just saying it how I see it. If you look back in history, every time the VIX has flipped bullish, like the way, kind of not very convincing flip, I'll be completely honest with you, right? This could be a false signal for sure. It's not very convincing, but every time in the past you can see it has flipped bullish, it has continued moving bullish on the MACD. Let's see if that plays out as well. So all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.